In Oklahoma, dreams turned to dust. People were blown off their land, forced to move west, creating the biggest migration in American history. Homeless, jobless, despised. Families found refuge in a government camp.
I'm Scott Thompson in Weed Patch, California.
But the Okies' accomplishments here have largely been ignored until now.
Join News on 6 anchor Scott Thompson for an Oklahoma Traveler special, Sunday night at 7:30. Brought to you by the News on 6.
Dear Okie, if you see Arkie, tell him Texas got a job for him out in California picking up prunes.
I'm sure you read The Grapes of Wrath. Well, what I've read in there was, I lived a lot of it.
Everybody's leaving, going out to California. Your folks, my folks, everybody's folks.
We'll hold the distinction of being the only nation in the history of the world that ever went to the poorhouse in an automobile.
We didn't know we were poor. As long as you had a belly full and had somebody to play with, what else was there, you know?
You know, it's about Americans overcoming adversity, empowering themselves, making something out of their lives.
They were blown from their homes by a conspiracy of bad times and bad weather, their lives carried away on huge clouds of dust. Some were sharecroppers. Tractors and combines were ending their way of life. Others were homesteaders, caught up in the grim cycle of drought and depression. Crops failed, prices fell, banks foreclosed, lives in ruin with no place to turn.
Who done it?
Listen, that's someone what done it. The dusters, they started anyways. Blowing like this year after year, blowing the land away, blowing the crops away, blowing us away now.
They were called Okies, but they weren't just from Oklahoma. They blew down Route 66 from Kansas and Texas, Missouri and Arkansas, the Dakotas and Colorado, maybe 1 million in all, headed for California, where they'd heard of oranges and endless sunshine and plenty of jobs, where things would be better. They just had to be.
Ain't you gonna look back, Ma? Give the old place a last look? We're going to California, ain't we? All right, then, let's go to California. Well, that don't sound like you, Ma. You never was like that before.
I never had my house pushed over before. Never had my family stuck out in the road. Never had to lose everything I had in life.
The Oklahomans had been traveling for weeks, sometimes months, in broken down old cars and trucks, everything they owned strapped to the sides. And then they come down out of these California mountains and they lay eyes on that, the great green irrigated fields of the San Joaquin Valley. They'd found the land of milk and honey, or at least they thought so.
You can still stand in the foothills of the Tehachapi Mountains and feel them passing, sense the anticipation and uncertainty they felt upon coming face to face with their future in the fields. The greatest migration in American history. Desperate souls, all of them.
That was one reason that Kern County attracted so many, because they knew cotton. Mm-hmm. And of all that, they didn't know oranges and stone fruit and all that. They had to learn peaches and that kind of stuff. But cotton was like home. You know, they knew they could pick cotton.
In a little corner office in the back of her Bakersfield home, Doris Waddell keeps track of a generation that's passing. She's a retired librarian. When the branch where she worked was remodeling and decided it had no room for its collection of the Dust Bowl migration, Doris took it all home. On one wall, watching over her efforts, is Florence Thompson, the desperate Oklahoma mother whose sullen gaze came to personify a country in crisis. Doris finds her presence a comfort.
Because I see that picture and then I see my Okies today, you know, and I see how they are and what their lives have become and the things they've accomplished. And it makes you realize that, you know, we just think we've ever had a bad day. You know, we don't know what a bad day is.
The Okies were scorned, but by sheer number they transformed California. The evidence is everywhere, be it biscuits and gravy on the menu, or the twang of the Bakersfield sound in the bars, or in the simple down-home dignity of the last generation who can speak firsthand of picking cotton and potatoes from dawn until dusk.
We lived right here where the first duplex is, right here.
On this side?
On this side. We was right there in tent 529.
Earl Shelton was 7 when his dad steered their battered car off the Weed Patch Highway and into the Arvin Federal Migrant Camp. The Sheltons made the break from Scipio, Oklahoma, when selling possum and skunk skins wouldn't put food on the table anymore.
Dad had 12 acres of cotton, and the drought hit so bad. Well, that's when we packed up and left, but we didn't have anything to pack.
For years, Earl Shelton's home was a canvas tent slung across a cement slab. He'd lived there with his father and brothers for 13 years, until they could move up to a tin shed.
I don't remember going hungry myself, but I know my dad did.
It opened in 1935, one of 17 government camps scattered up and down California, New Deal relief to the squalor in which so many Okies had been living along the roads and in the fields.
Well, you know, this was our first indoor toilets and showers. That's pretty nice.
Probably one of the better places we'd lived in.
Yeah, that's probably the nicest place we'd ever lived in when we got here.
The Rush family made the move from Bachito, Oklahoma. Brothers Ray and Max Rush, just little guys then, began their days picking potatoes and cotton, ended it that way too. In between there was school, unless the family was following the crop to Oregon and Washington, and then school was out of the question.
When we'd leave here to go work, we always had 3 or 4 mattresses on top of the car, and
plus a trailer load.
Plus a trailer load of stuff. We had everything we owned. Every time we moved, everything we owned went with us.
Still, over the years, the Weed Patch Camp remained home for the Rushes and thousands of others like them. In the evenings, after field work, children would gather in the grassy courtyard and play games. Parents would visit. They were souls with few things of material value, but in their desperation, they formed unbreakable bonds.
Nobody had no more than nobody else because they all had nothing, so pretty easy to get along.
Walk through the old community building, dry rotted and peeling now, and listen to the faint echoes of the cakewalks and pie suppers and square dances, of the rootless lives who found comfort in each other and in their memories of places and people left behind.
The generation my dad and those people were the one that really went through hell, if you want to call it, and especially my dad losing my mother. But she lost Mom, and the drought came, and we came to California expecting for money to be growing on trees, and it didn't happen.
Drawn by their misery, a San Francisco newspaperman, John Steinbeck, passed through Weed Patch, writing stories on the Okies' plight. His notes became The Grapes of Wrath. The book became a movie. And the nation took a new look at the tragic Okie heroes through the eyes of the fictional Jode family.
I'd like to stay, Ma. I'd like to be with you and see your face when you and Pa get settled in some nice place.
Parts of the movie were filmed at the Weed Patch Camp, and 3 original buildings still stand as Steinbeck saw them, fast deteriorating like the generation that knew them as home.
This is what the buildings will look like.
On her office wall, Doris Waddell keeps an architectural drawing of how they'd look restored. She hopes to see them stand as a tribute to the men and women who took a wrenching chance on a better life and proved that decency can never be measured in dollars.
And I hope I'm getting the connection across that just because people live in poverty or live differently than you live doesn't mean they're worse. Different doesn't have to be bad. Different is just different, that's all.
His mother dead of breast cancer, his family's farm in Scipio, Oklahoma, blown away in huge clouds of dust. Earl Shelton was 7 years old when his father loaded up he and his brothers and landed here, the federal government's camp for migrant farm workers south of Bakersfield, California. They called it Weed Patch. It's where Earl would grow up, the family home, a canvas tent on a concrete slab.
But like I say, your little slabs, that was the size of your living room, kitchen, bedroom, and all.
It's where Earl saw his first electric light bulb and his first flush toilet. And against all odds, it's where he got the chance to go to school.
I wouldn't have had it any other way. And the other thing of it is, what made it that way was the camp and the school.
The Okie children pouring into California in the 1930s were straining classrooms and budgets. Locals didn't want them attending school. They were considered filthy, ignorant, no better than animals, undeserving of an education, best left to field work. And that's where Leo Hart comes in. He was the superintendent of a school district next to the weed patch camp, who knew the migrant children needed an education. So Leo Hart led them in building their own school, and he hired teachers to help them.
And you had to have the right group of teachers. Leo knew that. I mean, they had to be able to do everything. Carpenters, you know, besides the regular subjects. And
Jerry Stanley's a retired college professor who's written a book about the school Leo and the Okie children built.
You have no idea the hostility that he faced as superintendent. I mean, they wouldn't sit next to he and his wife in church. Restaurants, PTA, they have to sit in the back row.
Ignoring their critics, Leo and the children didn't just build classrooms, but the county's first swimming pool. And they brought in old military airplanes, inside which they held class and taught avionics. There was home ec and carpentry. The kids managed their own farm. And before long, the school the poor Okie kids built became the envy of the county. And every family in the district was fighting to get their child enrolled.
I think that one of the things that I do is remind the students what a rich heritage we have, what we have inherited, and to keep on contributing to that heritage.
Mike Gonzalez is principal of today's Sunset School, which was built on the same site after Weed Patch School was destroyed in an earthquake. This is still a school of migrant children, but they're Hispanic now, reading Jerry Stanley's book of how their school came to be, reading of children just like themselves.
It's surprising to the kids that there were white children who were discriminated against. It was first period.
Monique Rodriguez graduated from Sunset. This daughter of field workers went back east to Bryn Mawr for her degree. Came back home to make a point.
That it is possible to go on to a very prestigious college and to get a good education and to then be able to come back if they choose to and help out their family.
Monique doesn't consider herself a role model, says that's for fancy people on TV. But you know, she is. In the spirit of Leo Hart, reminding a new generation, it's not where they've come from that matters. It's where they're going.
You just try to make the best of what your situation is and try to move forward.
Monique's the first in her family to buy a house and a car. She supports her parents. She represents the changing face of the San Joaquin Valley.
We still have a large migrant population, and the difference is the migrants now, instead of coming from Oklahoma, are from Mexico, but it is a struggling class of people who work very, very hard. If you would go out on any given day in the grape fields when it's 100, 105 degrees, you would see how hard and the work ethic that these people have.
Today's migrant camps begin to stir at 4 a.m. Headlights heading off in search of work. Some of them will drive 30, 50, 100 miles to find it. There's a chill in the vineyards before sunrise. Another day is about to dawn for those who keep the country supplied with fresh fruits and vegetables. Casimiro Montes is in charge of 60 pickers today. He's been in the fields most of his life, says he wouldn't want to do anything else.
I came from Mexico when I was 4 years. And this is my country, and I see a lot of changes.
70 years ago, this was the work the Okies did. There have been changes in the fields, of course. There are dinner breaks now, and water buckets every few rows, and portable toilets, but the fruit they harvest is still the same. And whether Okie or Mexican, they were and are the only people willing to do this work.
A top picker will only earn about $350 a week. It's why no one who began with Casimiro Montes 30 years ago is still in these fields.
They go back to school and they learn a little bit of English and they learn to do something else. Some of the women are working in motels and the men are doing any other kind of work to make a little extra money.
I like it. That's it. I enjoy it. I like it. and I feel good. And I eat grapes every day.
Eric Zendejas has been a migrant for 16 years. He spends 9 months of the year in the United States, 3 in Mexico, dual citizenship. He tried a construction job once. That's why he sticks with field work.
I'm used to it, and that's what I don't like to go anywhere else, because I'm used to this work. I'm used to work, and if I go to lazy jobs, I might not do it because I don't like it.
Eric Zendejas is an exception. For the most part, this latest generation of migrants looking for that elusive better life that America promises will quickly move on, and someone will come to take their places.
And our way to live is work, and that's what we do best, and that's what we come for, to work. And that's all we need. We need to have a job to do.
The jobs that no one else wants and never has.
Well, it is certainly inside circle up, go round.
On a Thursday night in Bakersfield, California, you can listen to the sounds of a generation passing.
And spread.
It comes in a sing-song pattern, drifting from the Ozarks and the Ouachitas and the Piney Hills to settle on the desert of the San Joaquin Valley. The Mavericks learned their steps in another time, in another place, brought their shuffle to California, and changed the state forever. What's been the impact of the Okies? Listen for it on a Saturday night in the rough and tumble burg of Oildale. On the beer-soaked dance floor at Trout's, they're still drawn by the bare-bones Bakersfield sound. The crackling guitars and steels, busy fiddles and high-harmonied honky-tonk that was born in the Okie migrant camps. In a fancy new dinner theater standing alongside a Bakersfield freeway,
Well, now every night you grant me where the bright lights are found.
74-year-old Texan Buck Owens holds court every weekend. With his Buckaroos, Owens took the Bakersfield Sound national, turning his back on Nashville and never looking back.
I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee.
And then there's the poet of the common man, Merle Haggard. The Okie from Muskogee isn't. He was born in Bakersfield, where he learned his craft from those whose pictures hang in the corner of the Kern County Museum. Like Oscar Whittington, whose family moved from Ringling, Oklahoma. By the time he was 7, Oscar had picked enough cotton to buy his first fiddle. He was on his way to becoming a pioneer of the Bakersfield sound.
Wham-bang, good dance music. Because most all of us drifted from Oklahoma at one time or another.
Tommy Hayes drifted west from Hartshorn. He gave Buck Owens his first Bakersfield gig for $10.50 a night.
We stuck to our guns and did our own thing and put our own thoughts and our own feelings to music.
These are the Oklahoma minstrels of stale beer and bar fights. Their music, heartfelt, simple, and direct.
It was a hard way of life. People, you know, they pick cotton. I'm telling you, I picked cotton, and it was hard.
Jimmy Phillips spent time as a studio drummer at Capitol Records.
And all of these stories came from these people, and they had a lot of stories to tell. And that's how, and they wrote songs about this.
They never found fame, but those who did stand on their shoulders.
From Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, every area has their own little sound going, and when you get to a certain spot, then they mesh.
You can still hear those musical roots intertwined with hellfire and brimstone on Wednesday nights at the Lighthouse Tabernacle in Lamont. Before the Dust Bowl migration, there were few such churches in California. Today, Southern Baptists dwarf every other congregation. Everyone at tonight's service has ties to Oklahoma.
Them roots that has come out from Oklahoma is still very heavy out here.
Listen to the laughter coming from a back room at this Bakersfield bowling alley every Thursday morning. It's friendship formed by fire.
We all depended on each other. I mean, if somebody got sick or somebody died, everybody pitched in what they could, and we helped bury them, or if somebody was hungry, we would always share our food.
They began life in Porham and Eufaula, Tuttle and Durant. They'll end it in California.
Oklahoma soul food.
Poverty pudding.
They share more than a love of biscuits and gravy. They've come to love each other because of what each of them survived, growing up side by side in migrant camps, sloughing off the taunts of dumb Okie.
We've all had it tough, and you know, we've been able to overcome a lot of obstacles in our lives, and most of us are pretty well off now. So, you know, I think that keeps us together.
The fellows that surround us here in this breakfast table here, you know, when we're all gone, I hope people look back and say, well, you know what, those guys was a good bunch of people. You know, they showed us that they could come through the rough times and, you know, better themselves and everything, and I hope that they take a different look at us, you know.
That's beginning to happen. The Grapes of Wrath was banned from Kern County schools and libraries and burned on the streets in 1940. Now the county commission is encouraging its reading.
62 years ago, Board of Supervisors of Kern County banned the reading of the Grapes of Wrath. And now here we're today encouraging the reading. It's a nice moment. Thank you very much.
The way the community is looking at that migration now is very, very healthy. It's saying, yeah, we've made those mistakes in the past. We can't really rectify those, but we can honor that heritage.
Pat Rush doesn't need a proclamation to feel proud of her past.
We'd go over to my Aunt Maddie's and Uncle Edgar's house and say, "Gee, yet? Nah, we don't want to eat. We done been."
Whenever the inspiration hits her, and it's more often now as the years go by, Pat Rush sits at her kitchen table and leaves a message for those who were coming after. Born in Oklahoma, raised in Arkansas, she wants to leave a record of the Okie speak her family brought with it on their Dust Bowl migration to California.
If you're asking someone like what time school starts, you might say, "What time does books takes up?" You'd say, "Books take up a little bit after 8." And they'd say, "Man, kind of alive, that's kind of late for school to take up, ain't it? For books to take up." Your tick's like you, Scott.
She used to be ashamed of her language from the hills. Then, with the wisdom that comes from the passing years, she realized it was a unique gift to be passed along with pride to those grandchildren and great-grandchildren whose smiles grace her refrigerator.
Because I just thought that'd be more valuable than anything else for me to leave to our heritage. That's what I want to leave for my babies.
On a wall of Pat's Bakersfield home hang her brother's war medals, a Purple Heart among them. Jimmy Blagg's diction wasn't questioned that day he stormed ashore on Normandy Beach or lay dying in a German field. That's why his sister keeps writing.
I'm proud of where I came from.
Mary Evelyn Barnett was born in 1926 in Willeka, Oklahoma.
And finally, listen as Doris Waddell notes the passing of strength and pride.
She met and married George Brooks in Kanawha, Oklahoma on December 22nd, 1933.
Every day, Doris looks through the newspaper obituaries.
Fleda Mae West, born in 1918 in Peggs, Oklahoma.
And every day, she finds one or two additions for her ever-growing collection of lives summed up in small columns of type.
Mrs. Burns was born on February 5th, 1907 in Indian Territory, Oklahoma.
It's a small way to note the turning of life's page.
Doesn't tell us very much about her life, but Indian Territory, I like that.
Individually, they survived. Collectively, they changed their nation and the way it considers the true measure of life's outcasts.
The California culture was changed forever. The whole West Coast was changed forever by these people who came, and I like it the way it is. I'm glad they came.
I'm a dust